That's throwing me off. It just boom, and we are recording. What's up, wrestling fans? Two Bros Wrestling Show. I'm not going to be intimidated by the little red light tonight because I didn't get my spinny thing beforehand. I was almost ready for it tonight. Kevin, what's happening, man?
Don't be intimidated, Doug. Don't anyone at home be intimidated because tonight we are all talking the truth to the man, a friend of the show, CM Punk, has asked us all to kindly let him know when he is telling lies. And tonight, that's exactly what we're going to do. In our main event topic, we're starting from the beginning of CM Punk's career and establishing the pattern of lies he has been telling from day one until this very present day. Doug, this one, let the affiliates know we may be going long. We were comparing notes beforehand. There's a lot of lies.
There's a lot of there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack here when you start looking at this from a historical perspective and you start putting the pieces together. Man, this poor guy just has so many people standing against him.
We're going to go through all that in our main event topic, but first, a little opening bell for the
There
folks.
we go.
In the news this week, we're going to lead off with a fact we, I guess, had a little fun at Tony Khan's expense based on his claim that the upcoming All In is the biggest wrestling event of all time. Typical wrestling hyperbole, right?
Right.
Well, Tony may very well be getting the last laugh, Doug,
really?
Because this past week, All In has passed a significant milestone, surpassing the ticket sales for the legendary WrestleMania 3 featuring Hogan versus Andre. All In has sold at this point around 78,000 tickets, surpassing the real WrestleMania 3 attendance figure of around 78,000. Even though WWE inflates the numbers yearly, they inflate.
What are you talking about?
Oh, they say 93,000 has always been that holy grail number, but that is actually part of the problem with trying to figure out exactly where this is going to fall, because historically wrestling has not exactly been very forthright. Promoters haven't in their attendance numbers.
Kevin, the next thing you're going to tell me is they lie about the wrestlers' heights and weights too, right?
Well, I don't want to bust your bubble to that. We're going to start talking truth on CM Punk. I don't want to tell you about too many lies of other people, but yeah, they're always lying.
Oh, no, kayfabe, dude, kayfabe.
This already puts All In, though, in the top 10 legit of attendance figures of all time, and actually closer to the top 5 if you take out the top 2, because the top 2 most attended wrestling shows of all time were the New Japan WCW co-branded shows in Korea, and there was some, sort of mandatory attendance required by the dictators. So if the government, can threaten your family if you don't show up to the wrestling show, I'm not sure we should count that one.
And you're not talking about Vince McMahon, right?
No.
I just need to get clarification there. Okay.
But yeah, who knows? When all's said and done, All In is easily looking to be in the top 5 of all time, and we'll see what it passes next by the time they got a few more weeks to book matches and sell tickets.
Well, the last 3 days, the way AEW premium live events go. So
that's right. At least they're starting early on, European time. So
right.
Yeah, that'll end about 4 a.m. here. We have some confirmation, Doug, on something else we were discussing previously regarding the merger of UFC, WWE into the new company TKO Holdings. We actually, I think maybe on our last show, we're speculating when exactly this might take place. All we knew was that it was happening this year.
Yeah.
And now, though, we have confirmation that the official new company, which will be under the owner's Endeavor, is going to be official mid to late September. So we're talking a matter of weeks at this point. This info is courtesy of Endeavor's second quarter earnings report. I will point out, though, that during that report, Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel said that once the deal closes, there will be, quote, cost savings and synergies that will happen immediately.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess on the back end, behind the scenes folks in Stanford probably get a little nervous when they heard that news, but obviously more to come.
Yep.
And speaking of speculation and matters we've been covering, Doug, we reported this last week about the Elite re-signing with AEW. We talked at the time, how they had decided as a group they were going to vote and follow the vote, and we wondered whether or not it was unanimous. Probably was not going to be
Not,
unanimous.
yeah.
Obviously, there's 4 of them, so it couldn't be a tie either. But we
Mm-hmm.
did get confirmation this week because the Young Bucks went on Swerve Strickland's
Yep.
podcast, talked about how they had come to this agreement, and they said the votes did not align every time. So this verifies it was not only not unanimous, I guess that means let the speculation begin, and a 3-1 vote. Who was going,
What?
Triple H, please?
Well, and apparently there were multiple votes too, and I guess even Matt and Nick weren't agreeing all the time. So
Every time.
yeah.
So, yeah. Who knows if that one day will more details will be known, but we do know that at least at various points there were at least one member at any given time of the elite that were ready for Titan Towers.
Mm-hmm. Or is that Titan Towers or Escape from Our Main Event man?
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Speaking of these corporate synergies, Doug, AEW's partner Warner Brothers Discovery are preparing to add a live sports tier to their Max streaming service. The tier will this is interesting. The new live tier will bear the branding of the Bleacher Report.
Oh.
And it's set to include MLB games, NBA games, NHL, and NCAA games. Nothing was mentioned about AEW, but obviously this is AEW's current partner, and very likely this new live streaming service is going to play a role in the expected new TV rights deal that AEW is hoping to negotiate with Warner Brothers Discovery.
Right.
Also could mean the long-term solution to AEW's domestic premium live events problem, and that is finding some way to have a steady partner, very similar to how Peacock does WWE events.
Right.
I would not be surprised, since this is a thing that's about to happen for Warner Brothers. If AEW ends up staying with Warner Brothers, they're going to end up on this Bleacher Report tier on Max.
I would not complain about that at all.
No. To hopefully get your Ring of Honor as well as your AEW pay-per-views and all that by just one monthly cost.
As long as it works better than that Bleacher Report app. My goodness, that thing is a beast.
And I'm thinking that since it is bearing the Bleacher Report branding, that's more indication that there's probably an easy slotting over here for AEW. This could be good for everybody.
Yes.
Lots of follow-ups in the news tonight, Doug. Last month, we reported on the movie that was being filmed in Louisville, Kentucky about the life of Margaret Burke. So now we have an update. Yeah. Major shakeup of the roles. Originally, it was reported that Charlotte Flair was set to play the role of June Byers and Liv Morgan would portray Clara Mortensen. But we even reported that the women had filmed a portion of the movie. But a new report from the Wrestling Observer reveals that both Flair and Morgan are no longer attached to the film. Instead, June Byers will be portrayed by NWA Women's Champion Camille Brickhouse, while Mortensen will be played by former AEW Women's Champion Toni Storm. So reportedly Flair had agreed to the film, but then WWE got involved, and that's when everything fell through.
Yeah, so much for independent contractors, huh?
No word if that's the same thing that happened with Liv Morgan losing her role to Toni Storm. But we did learn from Meltzer that the reason that Jim Ross is listed as an executive producer is good old JR was savvy enough that he purchased the movie rights for this book back in the day. And then he pitched the idea of a film to a friend in the movie business. And that's what started this whole ball rolling. So he gets that executive producer credit, probably a decent stack of cash. Again, good for JR.
Yep.
Trinity Fatu is also appearing in the film, and the actors who are portraying wrestlers are receiving training from the great Al Snow. Al is a part owner of Ohio Valley Wrestling there in Louisville, so I guess it made sense with proximity to have him involved. So still interesting. Looking forward to it. Lots of wrestlers involved, just different wrestlers than what we originally reported.
Right. Just card subject to change.
Speaking of women wrestlers, and I know we mentioned Trinity, but with the women's tag titles, Doug, they must be cursed, the WWE women's tag titles, because ever since Trinity and Sasha walked out and left them behind, it wasn't long after that poor Liv Morgan was injured. putting an abrupt end to her title reign with Raquel Rodriguez. And now the same things happened to the current champ. Sonya Deville suffered a serious knee injury that is going to
Mm-hmm.
require surgery. The injury occurred when Deville and Chelsea Green were defending the tag titles against Bianca and Charlotte on the July 28th SmackDown. There is not a timetable for her return. Doug, more women's wrestling news than.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard about Jade Cargill, like perhaps being done?
I have heard this.
Like done.
I have done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are reports she has no plans of returning to AEW, and she's currently on a hiatus. They don't mention her anymore. She had a record TBS title run that came to an end when she lost her title to Chris Statlander in what was her first ever defeat. And
Uh,
this actually would be quite a blow to AEW when you think about how much they invested in giving. I mean, she got the Goldberg treatment,
she
undefeated for 3 years.
Yes, she got the Goldberg treatment and really was protected in her loss because her loss came with like a money in the bank cash in type thing because
Yes,
she had just defended and was, I mean, she was just so protected in that because, yeah, she lost, but she lost in her second fight of the night, one right after another.
and it would essentially all this build and work that had been put into her would be for
Hmm.
nothing if she doesn't return because they were still building her. Yes, she was a champ, but
Yes.
she never mixed it up with some of the biggest names that they were kind of keeping her
Right.
separate from. There was no Britt Baker, no Sheeta, no Tony Storm. Really, it was just always presumed that she was being groomed to be that role of top female, and the TBS title was one way to get there.
Right.
It should be noted, apparently, that Cargill is in a different situation than most as far as needing a contract or needing the money. Did not realize this until I was reading these reports, but this will mean nothing to Doug because it's sports. But
Oh, sports ball. Okay, here we go.
she is married to former pro baseball player Brendan Phillips, who spent a lot of time in our area as a Cincinnati Red. So finances are obviously going to make her situation different than other women on the roster. I hope she returns, though. I was thinking she was starting to really kind of gel as a wrestler.
Yeah, because I mean, she was definitely green as grass, but they did the right thing. They accentuated her positives and hid her flaws, and get like you said, they gave her the Goldberg treatment, and I think she got progressively better as she
Yeah,
went along. And then she takes a hiatus that may be permanent.
maybe permanent. We will keep you up to date on the whereabouts and possible retirement of Jade Cargill
Where
as
the
we know
road is
more.
Jade Cargill. I like it.
Well, speaking of contract status, Doug, it was big news when Kevin Owens re-signed with WWE a few years ago. At the
Hmm.
time, we noted his contract was for 3 years. We're only halfway through that period, but with a year and a half left, KO, currently out with a rib injury, made some news recently when he brought up his
Yeah.
contract and his future. The comments
Hmm.
getting all the attention was Kevin saying he's not sure he'll be wrestling in a year and a half. Now he did
Hmm.
say that when he signed his deal, he thought he'd see himself wrestling for 5 or 10 more years, but
Right.
now he's not so sure. He noted he wanted to remain with WWE in some capacity, but whether that's in the ring or something else is to be determined. Doug, to me, this sounds like one of those guys, like those Ring of Honor guys who've really put their body through it before they actually made it to the big time,
Hmm.
and now that you're sitting out with the injury and maybe feeling all those years, the idea that you're going to be able to do this forever might be something that he's mulling over in his head.
Yeah, because I was watching uh Dynamite and Rob Van Dam just walked to the ring and poor Rob just walks so uncomfortably. But I mean, he can turn it on when he hits the ring, but and I was thinking those definitely those old ECW guys and the ROH guys. Yeah.
Worked hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last news item, Doug, I have is that during the post SummerSlam media scrum, Triple H said that the spot with Brock Lesnar endorsing Cody
Yeah.
Rhodes at the end of their match completely unplanned.
Mhm.
If that is in fact true, and there's no reason really to doubt that there
Right.
is, this really checks with that common belief that Lesnar is a
Mhm.
Rhodes fan and agreed to this whole series of matches as a way of putting Rhodes over out of the respect he holds for the American Nightmare. Interestingly, I saw another interview with Cody where he said he legit thought there at the end that
Who's going to
when
get an F5?
yeah, when he went face to face with him, he thought he was about to get punched for real. That he did not
Uh-huh.
know that was coming as well. And so, if these guys aren't working us, and maybe they are, but it does lend some credence to that little smile that Cody gave at the end of it all, like, knowing what a big deal this was,
Right.
because
Yeah.
Brock don't do that. Brock
No.
does not. I've never seen him do that with anybody.
Uh-uh.
He certainly didn't do it with this next person we're getting ready to talk about, Doug.
Who would that be, Kevin?
It's time
Oh.
for our main event.
And it's interesting because they're both Paul Heyman guys too.
That is true. They do. There is some commonalities there, and Paul may be one of the few folks that maintained a decent relationship with CM Punk through the years. And I guess the way that we should approach this tonight is, let's, as a caveat, say we have been vocal fans in the past of CM Punk. There is no doubting his influence in the business. There's no doubting the talent in the ring, the matches, the promos, like those things hold up because, well, the quality is there. You can say what you want about the man, but the quality is there. Now, though, we're in a different era of CM Punk where we have to sort of take his entire career into some sort of perspective. And today the man will say, "Tell me when I'm telling lies," almost as a heel mantra. But that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to look back, starting from the beginning and every stop along CM Punk's way, the lies that now in retrospect we realize were being told to us. Doug, this is going to shock you. I want to start out with one lie that you may or may not know.
All right. What we got?
Did you know his name is not actually CM Punk?
What? Chick Magnet Punk?
His parents did not call him Chick Magnet Punk. Apparently, his real name is Philip Jack Brooks.
What?
I know, right? A lie.
What? Oh, man. How can we trust this man?
I know.
How?
Right there. That's a case closed, right? So, yeah, Chick Magnet Punk.
Just as a side note, was it Phil Jack Brooks? That is such a country singer name.
Maybe that's why he wanted to change it. Although it really wasn't up to him to change it. Apparently, CM Punk was a moniker he was given.
Mm-hmm.
So Punk rose to prominence in the Indies. It did not take long on the Indies for controversy to find Punk. He got the name CM Punk because Chick Magnets, the tag team, there was CM Venom, whose partner didn't show up that night. So CM Venom needed a CM Punk, and that's how it became that way.
Interesting. So
yeah, Lunatic Wrestling was a backyard promotion, really, is where he started with his brother Mike, a group of friends. Apparently, Punk took it way more seriously, surprise, surprise, than the friends. And because of this, as soon as Lunatic Wrestling began to take off, apparently there actually was a falling out with his brother as well. Punk reportedly found out that his brother had been embezzling thousands of dollars from the small company, and this caused Doug the two to become estranged, and reportedly they've not spoken in the 30 plus years since. His own brother, and they're not talking.
Wow.
I mean, you'd think that the embezzlement story is probably true, or at the time, I guess I would have heard that and go, "Oh wow,
that's
CM Punk has a bad brother."
Yeah,
right. But now, is it true? I mean, does Mike Brooks have a platform that tell his side? Does anybody go asking him his side of the story? Or, I mean, Punk, that's a pretty one-sided way. Punk's the one who's apparently told that story, and so now it's gospel, right?
Tell us. We need to tell him when he's telling lies, Kevin. And I think that's what we're going to run into a lot tonight, because we're going to see so much through Punk's career where there are these altercations, there are these dramas, there are these almost blood feuds, honestly, with some people. And you have to start to question: is a Chick Magnet maybe like a jerk magnet and just pulls all these negative people into his life, or is there something more to it? Or is there something else there?
Once you find yourself at the center of enough of these, you can think that maybe the problem isn't always the other person.
Yeah. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
So after his start in the backyard promotion, he went to Chicago to train and became a student at the Steel Dominion under the training eyes of Ace Steel. Doug, I'm not
Oh,
sure if you've heard of Steel.
I
Um,
still. Did he bite someone?
I
Allegedly?
I'm pretty sure he never factors in again into the CM Punk story. This is just background.
Sure,
Speaking
sure.
of guys that will not come up again, Doug, but it was at Steel Dominion that Punk meets Scott Colton.
Oh, hi, Colt.
The two become best friends and would remain so until their dying days. End of episode. See y'all next week, fans.
And they all lived happily ever after.
So he really began to get attention for himself with these matches against Colt, Chris Hero, and others in a little promotion called IWA Mid South. He included matches there. You know how legends pass through on the indies. So guys like Eddie Guerrero and AJ Styles, who were independent contractors at the time, will come through, have these great matches, go back and tell their contacts, hey, there's this kid. But, Doug, and what would maybe now we can consider after the brother episode in the Backyard Federation a pattern, there were issues there in IWA as well. So Punk at one point refused to wrestle. He claimed it was in protest to Ian Rotten, if you remember Ian Rotten, who apparently was the booker. Mistreatment of Chris Hero in the company. However, Hero has since stated that he believes there were other reasons, and Rotten's treatment of him was just an excuse by Punk to stop working for the company.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So right there from the start, there is a he said situation where Punk's excuse for why he did what he did actually refuted by the person who supposedly was at the center of it.
Yeah,
saying, no, that's not the reason. I know it seems strange that CM Punk would be using other things to scapegoat his rationale. But on the strength of the matches he had with Colt, he ended up getting hired by ROH, and this is where he would make his first broad impact, where I first became really aware of him. He eventually won the world title, actually was so respected there that he even ended up a trainer at the ROH school.
Yes.
Oddly, Doug, I could find very little about his time at ROH with problems with management. Which is making it one of the few promotions that might be the exceptions to these others. Did you? I know you have a list of guys.
I'm not. Most of these are more recent. His time with WCW or not WCW, WWE. Of course, there is some. Yeah, there's. I'm not seeing any ROH guys on here.
Well, this next company, I know we have a story. So while still working for Ring of Honor, Punk joined NWA Total Nonstop Action, now known as Impact, of course. He was paired with Julio De Niro as members of Raven's TNA Alliance The Gathering. And then shortly before a show on TNA, Punk had a physical scuffle with Teddy Hart. Now, again, at the time, you and I, if we hear this story, we're going to think, well, that Teddy Hart's crazy because he is, right? I mean, so it's obvious that we know whose fault it is. It's Teddy Hart. This all happened outside of a restaurant, broken up by Sabu, presuming with chairs. Exactly. The scuffle reportedly stemmed from an RH show where Teddy Hart performed 3 unplanned spots, putting several other wrestlers in danger of injury. So, of course, this is Punk, in Punk's mind, standing up for others that couldn't stand up for himself.
Okay, so there's already the pattern there where he inserts himself to be the hero, regardless if the situation needs a hero or not. So even if we go back, even if we just 3 incidents we've already discussed here, we look at it, what really was going on with that backyard? Was there embezzling, or was he standing up for the wrestlers there, or did that? I wonder, did that backyard promotion break apart then? Was that so he could move on from that?
So he can move on.
Yeah.
And give himself an excuse, the way that Chris Hero is saying that he gave, used him as an excuse for what happened in the IWA Mid-South.
So do you know how long that he was with TNA after this Teddy Hart incident?
So a very brief cup of coffee, because that ended in March 2004. when he had a dispute with TNA offices over
Oh,
his ability to compete in ROH at the same time.
uh-huh.
Uh, TNA supposedly ordered that their contracted wrestlers were no longer able to appear on other TV broadcasts,
Okay.
and Punk said, "Nope, I'm going back to ROH." If that's in fact true.
Apparently the only place where neither one of us can really find any. Well, Steen is mentioned, but I'm not sure when. Because he's had some sort of beef with Steen. I don't have a lot of details. I have a list of 20 some odd people, and it does get odd. It includes like some pop stars and some NFL personalities or superstars or whatever you call the sports ball players that play NFL things.
Well, now we'll get into the period where those folks will come in, because at this point, Punk was big enough of a name that he did get the interest of WWE. And this is when he has his broadest platform, and then probably makes most of these encounters that have led to bad feelings through the years. He gets signed to WWE and begins in their training promotion at the time. This was pre NXT, even pre Florida Championship Wrestling, I guess, because he was assigned to OVW in Louisville.
Yeah.
Did make it to the main roster, but if you remember, it was part of WWE's watered down version of ECW is when he first premiered.
That's what I was going to say, because there is an older WWE like biopic kind of thing about Punk, not a biopic, a documentary. And I remember Heyman talking about his time in OVW, where Punk would be the first one there and the last one to leave, and just studying the tapes. And clearly he never had any issues with Paul. I'm sure to this day he's a Paul Heyman guy, even though his shirt says he's a Collision guy. But because Paul talks very favorably of him. Not something a lot of people throughout the wrestling career actually do, as we when we dive into this. But Paul talks very favorably of him, talking about basically he is a student of the game. The first one there, the last one to leave, studying tapes, trying to learn all aspects of the business. And then he
that's
moves
from
on.
Paul Heyman.
Yeah.
But Paul doesn't always have a stellar reputation with the boys behind the scenes either. So while we recognize Paul's genius, it might take a troubled genius to recognize a troubled genius, perhaps, as someone who rubs folks the wrong way. Once he did make it from ECW, though, to the main roster, that's when he really started to lay into the whole straight edge gimmick. So maybe this is a time to call out that as in and of itself a lie. Not that he's not straight edge, but that the whole idea that the straight edge lifestyle makes one better than others. I know it worked as a heel tactic.
Right.
But looking back 20 years in Punk's comments during that time, I'm not so sure that whole straight edge air of superiority, I'm better than you, that Punk was using is actually a heel tactic and not just the way that he really feels about it.
Yeah.
Because he had that feud with Jeff Hardy.
And it's a great feud because he's straight edge. They bring Jeff's demons actually into the storyline, and it's a great storyline, but it's not a cool.
I mean, retrospectively,
yeah, exactly. At the time, it's great wrestling. I think even at the time, I was like, eventually, this is going to lead to him bringing up Jeff's issues because he's straight edge, and it definitely did. It was like, this plays perfectly into the characters. But
for all we know, and especially at the time, probably what we thought is that both men are comfortable with this. They've signed off on this, and whether we like it or not, think it's too personal, it's going to lead to something great. But at one point, the charismatic Enigma departed the company to take some time off, heal his injuries. But Punk didn't let it stop. He continued to lay into Hardy's problems and subsequent promos, and it reportedly created some real life animosity between him and the Hardy brothers.
Oh yeah. Yep. Definitely Jeff here. Yeah. So many people on this list. So many.
It's hard to say that with as many people who have those kind of stories. The Jeff Hardy one, I can understand if you're, all in on like we're going to do this, I'm okay with it. But if you're off TV, if you're not with the company and the guy's still talking about your addictions, I can understand where the Hardys would not take kindly to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Jeff, Jeff's very public about his demons, and to this day about his backsliding, and
Yeah.
and so I don't in retrospect, so much of this just leaves a very bad taste because you start to see over and over there's this pattern of, I don't know if it's insecurities that he has where he needs to make himself pump himself up, become the hero, become the lead in nobody's movie but his own. I really don't understand it.
So, because he wanted to get so personal sometimes and it felt real, part of the reason we probably liked him, it felt like this guy's on the cutting edge. He speaks the truth to people
Truth to
that we
power,
think
yeah.
that truth to power.
The voice
So
of the
because
voiceless.
of that, Doug, let's talk about let's give a moment to talk about the pipe bomb.
Pipe
This is
bomb.
one of the more focused and famous work shoot promos in
Mhm.
wrestling history. It's Punk addressing his real life issues with WWE. He
Yeah.
proceeds to call Vince McMahon and his family out of touch with the wrestling business, questioning some of the decisions to promote other talent over people who were better, which, hey, surprise, Punk considered himself one of the best in the business. He
Best in the
believed he
world,
was
Kevin.
being best in the world, believed he was being held back by WWE. Doug, looking back, that promo's still cool and he still makes some pretty valid points, but now that we know what we know and you look back at it now, he does come across at times a little more whiny than it did, than that felt to me at the time that it was
And,
current.
and that is a very much, I think, another through line with Punk. You see where he's the voice of the voiceless. He tries to be the hero, but he's really the screaming victim. And so much of
So
this,
much of this.
so much of this. Now, that pipe bomb promo, when it was done, loved it. Thought it was great. I'm pretty sure you and I were both agreeing. Yeah, check that box. Check that box. Yeah, he's speaking truth to
Yeah.
power. Vince could do a lot better. Yeah, Goofus son-in-law. Yeah, go. Oh, look, he just shouted out Colt Cabana. This is awesome.
Yes.
Oh, and then they cut his mic. Beautiful. Done
Yeah.
beautifully.
And it
But
was done beautifully, and Vince had signed off in advance, and so they
exactly.
knew what was about to happen. So, I mean, it really was work shoot,
Mm-hmm.
and to that end, it succeeded beyond anyone's reasonable expectations. But it sure plays different when you go back and watch it now. Were we just maybe blind to the victimization of CM Punk, the martyrdom that he had at the time, or was there just not enough accumulated knowledge for us at that point? I'm trying to figure out how we didn't see this coming.
I'm really trying to figure this out too, because at it, wrestling wise, it was great. It was great TV. It was great wrestling. But in hindsight, there's just so much to put together. Maybe it took a 7-year absence, and then for him to come back and go, oh, wait a minute, this is why he takes his ball and goes home. And this is why he's been out for so long. And this is why Vince McMahon, the man who will work with anybody, has said, yeah, we're not bringing this kid back ever.
And you know what's funny, Doug, is that there was a point in time when on the Stone Cold podcast, well, I'm getting maybe a little ahead of myself here.
Right.
So 2014 was the year that really started to fall apart between Punk and WWE. So this is when Punk walks out for the first time. That Monday prior to Raw, it was like in January there in 2014. Punk legitimately walked out after telling Vince McMahon and Triple H he was going home. In February of that year, during a conference call with investors, McMahon said Punk was taking a sabbatical. So he was covering for him.
Yeah.
March, Raw, WWE starts acknowledging that Punk's absence on television. When they had like Punk's entrance music start playing, then Paul comes out to the ring instead. They slowly realized he ain't coming back, so they started removing him from their footage, promotional videos, and things like that. But it took them all the way to July of that year to actually say that, okay, he's walked out on the company. We don't expect him to come back, because it really took Punk going public and ask how it felt to be retired at 35 in an interview, that it was acknowledged that, oh, he's not coming back.
Right.
That's when July 15th of that year, they moved Punk from the active roster on WWE.com, put him to the alumni page. Um, that same day, Punk thanked all of his fans without mentioning WWE and said he was never, quote unquote, never gonna return to wrestling again.
Right.
Vince went on the on the Stone Cold podcast, Doug.
Right.
If you remember, it was big news. See Vince questioned by.
Right.
I know that had to be tightly edited. We know Vince doesn't give up that kind of control, but he did get asked about the CM Punk situation, and to your point, at that time at least, Vince said that it was a misunderstanding, that they maybe didn't handle things the right way, and that he would be open to working with CM Punk again. At that time, he was still, again, Vince McMahon, if it means money, will take anyone back eventually.
Absolutely. There's you put enough time and enough money in between Vince and somebody, and it really doesn't matter what happened unless you're CM Punk, unless you're, Philip Jack Brooks, not the country singer, but the wrestler.
And what happened, Doug, is that in that amount of time, instead of allowing cooler heads to prevail, Punk decides to go on his good friend Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast in November of that year and break his silence on his exit from WWE. Begins just burying everyone. And then sets a story, Doug, that I don't know now the veracity of, because at the time it sounded like this is awful, because he said he had been suspended for 2 months because he walked out, but that he walked out not just because he wanted to take his ball and go home, which was the Vince and Triple H story, but he was saying, I was hurt, they weren't taking care of me. He said that that he had a MRSA infection that he kept wanting treatment for, kept saying there's something wrong. They kept making him wrestle. And that if he had not got independently treated for it, that it would have killed him.
Right.
Now that may also be a lie, because under oath, he had to acknowledge on the witness stand that no physician ever actually diagnosed him with a MRSA or staph infection. So that part even may be, obviously it was a lie. I mean, he admitted that, well, no one ever diagnosed me with that, but in stories he would say WWE almost killed me.
They said the ringside doc would pump him full of antibiotics, and which will, cause some gastrointestinal issues with you, which he alleged quite a bit during that time. So,
broken ribs, injured knees, multiple concussions.
Ryback hurting him, because that leads to a feud with Ryback, not a wrestling feud, but I think like a Twitter feud with Ryback. He just starts collecting at this point in time. He just starts collecting, all of these enemies within WWE.
Do you feel like, I mean, you mentioned Ryback earlier. I know we're talking Teddy Hart. I mean, some of these folks were not the most credible of witnesses themselves because of their own behavior. But do you think that difficult, troubled, backstage wrestling behavior attracts other like-minded, and the trouble finds each other behind the scenes? The folks that keep to themselves stay out of it.
Trouble is going to find trouble, but just running through this list. Top of this list I've pulled up here and compiled is Vince. Stephanie had issues with Stephanie on and off screen. Vince on and off screen. Triple H on and off screen. Tony, well, we saw we saw Papa Khan and him and all that, but Tony Atlas. There was some issue with Tony Atlas. Ryback is on this list. Jeff Hardy, Colt, Hulk Hogan, Bobby Fish, Hangman, Kenny, Jacksons, the Young Bucks, The Rock, Chris Jericho, Dave Meltzer, John Moxley, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Kevin Steen. There's Teddy Hart, and Chris Brown. the singer, Chris Brown, and Sean Merriman, a former NFL player. I don't even know what I don't know. Some sort of sport
issue is.
I have no idea, but just Google it. You'll find this list that I did of all these people throughout his career, that he has had issues with.
And again, some of them do not make the most credible witnesses. Sure. I'm sure that in some of them, he's actually not in the wrong. But is he in the right on all of them? Is that even possible when you have a list that long?
So I was going to say, I mean, and of course, we know there's three sides to every story, right? So we're not saying any of these people he's dealt with are saints, and neither is he a saint. And I think we need to make that clear. We don't have,
He's the second city saint. No, you're wrong.
exactly. You're right. He is the second city saint.
Doug, you're telling lies.
Never mind. He is a saint. I'm going to go get my CM Punk shirt out of the trash. I'm sorry, Punk.
You say there's three sides to every story. The three-sided story is where I guess things really go off the rails, and I believe that the broader wrestling community starts looking at Punk in a different light. And that three sides to every story is Dr. Chris Amon, the doctor who supposedly refused to remove the fatty deposit on Punk, the one who supposedly gave him these, steroids or was trying to push him into the ring when he wasn't medically able to.
Right.
And Punk basically buries this guy on Colt Cabana's podcast by name, which of course brings a lawsuit. So, it's this lawsuit that really starts to shine a different light because the doctor sues for defamation. He sues both. He sues both CM Punk
and Colt, right?
And Colt.
Yeah.
And there's not too many people that are more well liked in wrestling than
Colt.
Colt Cabana.
I mean, come on. Now, Colt is the real second city saint.
$4 million in compensation was what the doctor was looking for, and an undisclosed amount in punitive damage. The WWE, for its part, issued a statement and video in support of the doctor because obviously it makes the WWE look bad.
Absolutely, yeah.
Case went to trial in 2018. A jury actually found in favor of CM Punk and Colt Cabana. So maybe he wasn't telling lies, or at least a jury thought he wasn't telling lies. Where it really turns, though, ugly is that in August of 2018, Colt Cabana files a lawsuit against CM Punk alleging breach of contract and fraud due to Punk apparently agreed and then later refused to pay Colt Cabana's legal fees.
Right.
Colt sought $200,000 in damages and an additional $1 million in punitive damages. Now, we all love Colt Cabana, but we know that Colt Cabana has not made near the money that CM Punk made. And if it is true that Colt Cabana had this agreement with CM Punk that, we'll do this as a team, but I can't afford it. Don't worry, bro. I got you.
Right.
And then he stifles him out of hundreds of thousands of dollars that Colt doesn't have. Obviously, that's a friendship that has gone publicly sour because then CM Punk files a countersuit against Colt for $600,000. And both of these were settled, dismissed. And according to PW Insider, there was actually the settlement involved zero financial compensation, which means poor Colt Cabana got nothing and was out whatever it cost to defend himself in the trial with WWE's doctor. And Doug, CM Punk couldn't just let this period of his life go.
I mean, he's still chewing on it, Kevin, to this very day. And is concerned about Colt and his mom's bank account.
Buried that poor man, embarrassingly buried him every opportunity that he had.
And I don't get that because I did not find an equal amount, and most of this is anecdotal knowledge of my CM Punk fandom throughout the years. But there are many wrestlers who are huge fans and great friends of CM Punk because he's done some really great things for people. What is it? Is it Joey Mercury that he helped out, helped him with his house? Kofi Kingston, he and Kofi tight. They traveled together. Kofi got the ride on his bus because CM Punk had his own bus. Okay, there's two people. And he's Paul Heyman guy.
Heyman guy.
I
guess, until it goes bad. I mean, Colt Cabana and he were like
Yeah,
that too,
that's
right?
it. How long before he turns on FTR now? And not like, a wrestling heel turn either, but
I mean, if CM Punk ends up unhappy or something, goes, in WWE, he apparently felt creatively stifled, was upset that he didn't ever get to headline WrestleMania, was paid less than some of the other wrestlers. It led to bad behavior. So how much do you cater to him to keep that bad behavior from, rearing its ugly head again?
and that's just the thing, because I've thought about this, because in the day job, not the wrestling guy on Sunday nights, but in the day job, I'm a manager. I have almost 30 employees. CM Punk would be such a nightmare to manage on a daily basis, because
Oh my gosh.
you have an incredibly talented individual who is very good at their job, but they are very troubled, and they're a very troublesome persona to deal with.
And for a
it,
manager, he thinks he knows more than you, which
yeah,
is the issue
right.
that he has ran into in every promotion he's been in, is that he has usurped his manager, sometimes very publicly.
Yes, yes.
So, and let's talk about when CM Punk turned on us, right? So, I mean, yes, he leaves. He's out of
Yeah.
wrestling in 2014. He announces that he had signed a UFC contract. And of course, a ton of money was spent on a middle-aged wrestler who had no professional combat sports experience,
Right.
all because of his name. They even used the name CM Punk. He didn't
Yeah.
fight under, his real name.
Because everybody would have thought it was a country singer getting in the octagon.
He leveraged what he had to make
Sure.
money, which
I
that's
can't.
what wrestlers do.
Yeah. We can't fault him for I mean, that's part of the business.
But he
It's
used that value of his name in interviews to badmouth not just WWE, not just Vince, not just Triple H. He used it to belittle the sport of wrestling,
yes.
well as its fans, us.
This thing that he loved so much, that he just turned so sour on because of the business.
And even if he had bad altercations with particular individuals, the fact that he would belittle the business and the people who like it, the people who had actually put all that money in his pocket, that was crossing. That was like the jumping the shark moment. The whole fallout from the lawsuit, and then him badmouthing not just Colt but wrestling fans as mouth breathers and all this just stupid stuff. And then he has his first UFC match, was taken down immediately. His second went to a decision, and it was lopsided, and he lost.
And remember, at the time, I was an adamant defender of CM Punk, telling you, can you really imagine how difficult it is for a guy who comes from a lifetime of pulling punches, and making sure his job is to legitimately protect his opponent, going into a sport where it's a legitimate sport, where the object is to hurt the guy across from you. You're not in some court. I was like, so that's, of course he's losing, because he has to deprogram himself. I was defending that, Kevin. You. And I'm like, no, dude, think about it.
Hey, maybe he really is just that good at pulling his punches, because he didn't hurt either of those guys at all. At all.
No.
I mean, if you look at that period of his life, pretending to be a tough guy, legit fighter was not only embarrassing for him. Honestly, this is probably one of the bigger lies Punk ever told. And this is one that he may have actually told to himself and truly believed he had what it took in his 40s to start an MMA career.
Yeah, of course, I think we just go back and ask Teddy Hart who the tough guy is.
Exactly, right? Apparently, CM Punk looked in the mirror in his 40s and saw Brock Lesnar looking back, go, hey, I can do this.
Right.
It did not, and actually Dana White pretty much told him that, we've got the value we could out of this. You need to go find something else to do.
So he wrote comic books for a while.
He did write comic books for a while, for 7 long years, right?
Uh,
Until Tony Khan picked up that phone. The
and for
unthinkable happened, Doug. The guy who hated wrestling, everything about wrestling, returned to wrestling in AEW in 2021. Doug, we all agreed this was a good thing.
this was an amazing thing, Kevin. Somewhere out there on the interwebs, you'll find me near weeping like a child, a man child, when Cult of Personality hits and he comes out from the gorilla position. I'm sure they call it gorilla in AEW too, but he hits the ramp and you know, grown men crying in the stadiums,
Grown men crying in the stadiums,
because
crying at home.
the voice of the voiceless, the Second City Saint, this amazing wrestler, this amazing personality, our hero, our champion had finally returned. It was like the return of the king. Aragorn is back.
We all agreed this was a very good thing, and for a while it was. Little did we know, though. Again, you look back to that turning point. We have the retrospect, the long 2020 angle now. It's that whole falling out with his longtime friend Colt Cabana. Who would have ever thought that all the way back at the Steel Dominion days, when he comes under Ace Steel, meets Colt Cabana, that would plant the seeds for the tension between the two friends that would never speak again, lead to a civil war in a wrestling promotion that wasn't even a gleam in Tony Khan's eye at that point in time.
My goodness.
That's the way it ended up playing out. Obviously, I guess maybe before we get to the famous all-out media scrum, the scrum from hell, as it was.
My goodness.
We could have maybe seen it coming, because the month before, the first real public controversy, after being kind of playing the part of good little choir boy for the first few months, we actually witnessed it.
We were there. We witnessed
the lies.
We were there and very, very confused of what was going on.
Explain to people what we're talking about. This would have been like August in AEW on Dynamite.
Right, AEW and Dynamite live, Charleston, West Virginia. Punk comes down. Of course, Punk, I don't think he's almost working heel, because he gets Virginia and West Virginia confused, talking about how Hangman Page is close by. No, dude, it's a completely different state, a lot farther south. But whatever, you're Chicago made. So, but what's going on here? And he's cutting a promo. He's in a program with John Moxley at this point, but he comes out and cuts a promo on Hangman, calls Hangman out, calls him to come down. In wrestling world, you call somebody out, you look up the ramp and wait for their music to hit, which, as good wrestling fans and marks that we are, everybody turns to look up the ramp. No music hits, no Hangman. He talks a little bit of trash about, I thought that's how I thought, coward, blah, blah, blah. And then goes on, and everybody's just like, what just happened?
Well, we're looking at each other like, huh?
What was that? What was that? And we later find out that Punk went into business for himself. He had
completely.
He had a beef from weeks, months earlier that he was still upset about, and decided that this night in Charleston, West Virginia, he's going to give Hangman a receipt when Hangman wasn't even in the building. Now that's the actions of a hero. That's a real stand-up guy right there, to call somebody out when they're not even around.
And then we fast forward a month, and the media scrum comments, Tony Khan's shocked facial expressions, the punching, the kicking, the barking, the biting.
Allegedly.
All involved were suspended. Punk was considered likely done with both AEW and wrestling. But Khan had a vision for Collision Magnet Punk, and he's now on
Collision Magnet Punk.
Hey, the dude's in every main event on Saturdays. Just tune in on Saturday nights. CM Punk's in the main event.
That's funny too, because I pull up this one article that I found and I made notes on, because it talks about, how like folks like Seth Rollins say he's, a jerk, he's selfish. But on the other hand, wrestlers like Ricky Starks, Powerhouse Hobbs, FTR think he's just the greatest person in the world. Who gets featured on Collision a lot? Who?
exactly.
Yeah, you know,
So, I mean, the media scrum was awful. I
it
mean,
was
who
so
does that?
uncomfortable.
It's must see viewing for a wrestling fan. Go tune if you are the one of the few people who have not yet seen it and are
Oh my
watching
goodness.
this. Stop this, go watch that, and then come back.
Right?
Um,
It's
he buries the elite. But Doug, you talk about a guy who doesn't let things go repeatedly, many years after the fact, still taking shots at Colt
that
Cabana.
talking and the most bizarre things, almost like when he was sitting in the ring in Charleston, West Virginia, calling out Hangman for I don't even know what, and talking about things that nobody in that arena knows what he's talking about. Pretty sure the people in the back didn't know what he was talking about when he starts calling Hangman out. That night at that scrum, he's talking about things like Colt has his mom on his checking account and just nonsense.
Yeah.
What is what what does that mean about anything?
He's picking a fight. He is picking a fight and telling and continuing to hold grudges and tell lies, and it led into a brawl that now has a divided company. Thank goodness, I guess, for Tony Khan. I have this other show, and we can just put you and people that you get along with on that show. But Doug, I guess maybe as we start to wrap this up, how long can you have a company that has to come together for pay-per-views when there are guys that during the week you have to keep on separate shows because of the legitimate animosity towards each other? And how long until the friends of CM Punk that can appear on Saturday night dwindle down to how are we going to fill a 2-hour show?
Well, yeah, because how long those friends that he has now that are aligned in Camp Punk, he's gonna fall out with somebody. So it's
How
gonna
does
go
it
south.
end then?
Yeah, how does it end then? Well, I guess it really ends, when, from a business standpoint, Tony's gonna Tony, right? He's gonna he has to have somebody on that show. He's let him run with his championship belt and let himself call himself the real world champion. My battery is blinking. I may have to switch out my camera soon. But how long does that go on? Or why do you let him have a belt? What are you doing? I get that you're creating basically a soft brand split here with Chick Magnet Phil, but when
I
does it end? How does it end? How ugly does it get when it ends?
6 months, 6 months
Six.
to a year. That's what I'm going to give it before something else happens that Tony can no longer just overlook, or it's causing, hey, this experiment worked keeping people separate for a while. Long term, well,
Mm-hmm.
they just re-signed. They're all still VPs.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
how long till Punk mouths off about him again?
yeah.
How long? I want to end with this one, Doug. One lie, one of the funniest lies I found when
Uh huh.
researching tonight's show. So Punk was complaining about part-time wrestlers. This was during his WWE promo,
Uh
feuding
huh.
with The Rock. A
Yep.
lot of folks do this, calling out the guys that
Right.
come
Sure.
back, and he was expressing real hurt feelings. He would do this sometimes off camera too, when he was in interviews and things, not on WWE programming.
Yep.
But during one of those off-the-cuff interviews where he goes into business for himself, this is what uh, CM Punk said about the Great One. So for him to come back and try to claim that WrestleMania was successful because of him, or that he's the most electrifying, whatever it is he is, it grinds on my nerves. I can only hope that in 10 years, when I'm old and out of touch, there are going to be some young Punk kids pointing at me saying, "You're old and out of touch." So Punk, we're not going to lie. We're not going to lie like you lie and pretend to be young Punk kids. But we can, however, truthfully say that those 10 years have passed. And yep, you called it at the time. You are, in fact,
Look,
old and
and
out of
no
touch.
touch.
Doug, with that, I know you have a blinking light. And that's
Let's go to the big
we're
finish.
not going to, we're not
Go
going
to
to get a check from Tony Khan this week.
No, we are not. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this camera and plug in another webcam. I think my mic will still stay live, and I'll keep my audio on so I can at least talk. So
Sounds good. You do that, Doug. We're going to first talk about our botch of the week. I'm going to do it, Doug. I'm going to keep it thematic,
do it,
and
Doug.
I'm going to do a Doug. Doug, my botch of the week is CM Punk and this whole business about the real world championship.
Yeah, that is ridiculous.
One, it's ridiculous that the announcers and Punk's opponents act as if the championship is legit. It's not that it goes completely unmentioned that, that he did not actually win that title, but it should be a constant calling him on BS if you're trying to use this as a heel tactic.
Right.
But it's convoluted because Punk isn't actually booked like a heel. He's booked as a babyface. It also doesn't help that this gimmick at all that AEW has had so many interim champions and then the FTR championship and so many unrecognized non-legitimate championships. The promotion has kind of made a mess of their title scene by endorsing way too many of these illegitimate titles. So sure, to have Punk claim to be the world champion and, spray paint your belt, these are common heel tactics, except he's not supposed to be the heel. He's supposed to save Ricky Steamboat because if they would have put puppies in Ricky Steamboat's arms, would have been the only thing more they could have done to make this like a ridiculous please cheer CM Punk. But it's just a mess.
That is it. Okay, so I'm going to be a disembodied spirit for the rest of this conversation.
You look good. You look good.
It's the best I've looked. I like the boomy as I talk. I feel like I'm a rap video. Boom, boom, boom. But anyway, yes, they absolutely had to get poor Ricky the Dragon Steamboat beat up to get Punk over and make him. Oh no, look, and he does this a lot too throughout his career when he is working as a face. I've seen clips. I've seen it. We've seen it when he's supposed to be working as a babyface. He will go out and legit attack crowds. Right after he comes back after Collision goes live. He's in of course, the safest place they could have had the first Collision was in Chicago. I mean, that's you're right, he is a Second City Saint, so that works out for Punk. But then as they go up into Canada, it's a different world up there, so he's got to work the I love Owen Hart, love Bret Hart, I'm a Hart guy, and try and work that. But some of the crowds are just not into it, and he comes out swinging.
Do you have a botch of the week?
You know what? At this point, I have had an opportunity to only watch Dynamite as we are, in our recording of this one. Because, shocker, here we go. I'm breaking kayfabe, but we're not live again, folks.
Lie.
Say, tell me when I'm telling lies, Kevin. I kind of like this podcast thing, where I'm a disembodied spirit. This is pretty cool, but. A botch of the week? No, I don't, because I'm sure it'll be something on Collision this week because Punk will be in the main event again, and I'm really getting sick of that. And Punk will open the show. Punk will do the Roman Reigns thing. He will be at the beginning and the end of the show. And who is Punk wrestling in Wembley? I don't even know. Has that been established yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. So we'll probably get some sort of story building to that now. And maybe it'll be Ricky again. Maybe he's doing the right thing and trying to build up Ricky. Maybe he'll build up Powerhouse Hobbs. Although I would like to say, please stop ripping the masks off of the Lucha Brothers.
There you go. That's your botch of the week.
Stop that. The Bucks have done it before on TV, and now the Blackpool. Come on. I know you're getting your heel heat, but stop it. Those guys are great.
So my performance of the week actually comes from Dynamite. So you can speak to this, and maybe you might echo this. This is something that you have called out before, but when performers keep doing good work, we have to keep recognizing that work.
Yeah.
MJF, Adam Cole.
Dude, yes.
I mean, come on. Their in-ring promo this week, the back and forth, the sudden turn, but not quite a turn on each other. They've got so many great moments out of this already, and they still have several weeks to do the big personal breakdown where it all blows up, and we see it percolating.
It's so good. I mean, it's not Bloodline good, but it's Bloodline good in a completely different way, though. You know,
It's
it's
getting
blood.
pretty close. And
It's bloodline with Sammy in the mix. Good. It's what it is.
yeah, because there is a comedy aspect to it too that they both are just nailing. So they are my performers of the week.
Hey, you know, MJF as a tweener, because we're never going to get a full MJF babyface. This is as close as I think we're ever going to get. But I love the MJF tweener where he's like, "Hey, I'm still a jerk." You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
told
told
you.
you guys, I'm still a jerk. Don't boo me.
You know,
I
he's
warned. Yeah.
blasting the little kids with dodgeballs and everything. It's great MJF, but you know, still lovable. And that takes talent.
Doug, did you have a favorite match of the week? There were some good ones on Dynamite.
Yeah, I really did like the Lucha and Blackpool. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
thought it
Good.
just feels like a cheap ending. And you know, another botch I could call out was AEW does a really good job of protecting their talent to almost to the point where it becomes annoying because you have like these really convoluted or gimmick finishes like the Jungle Boy RVD thing with the ref bump, and then you've got RVD who clearly wins with like a 27 count or whatever it is before Aubrey gets out there. Then Jungle Boy gets a cheap shot and a roll up and it's over. And so Jungle Boy gets the win. And it's a good way to get heel heat, but it just kind of seems almost cliche, over and over. They protect the veteran, put the new kid over, but you're not really putting the new kid over. You're just giving him heel heat, or at least
They
that's the way
definitely
I'm
go
seeing
to
it.
that. No, they go to
Yeah,
that finish way too often.
yeah.
My match of the week actually came from the night before on NXT.
Oh yeah,
So Noam Dar versus Tyler Bates was fantastic. It was a Heritage Rules match, even though
oh,
the Heritage Rule championship was not possessed by either guy. So the backstory on this one, Noam Dar lost the title a couple months ago and has hilariously been heartbroken about it. There's weeks he's been so convolutedly depressed. He sits there motionless in a chair with an 8x10 photo of the championship trophy in his arms. Like, it's just over the top ridiculousness.
I love it that he has
A picture. I
love
know. He
that.
just sits there and clutches a picture of his title. So to make him feel better, his crew gave him a replica version of the championship to pretend that he was still the champion. And so now it is Noam Dar's Heritage Cup, in addition to the actual Heritage Cup. But it should be noted, pay attention, AEW. The announcers and every opponent and every time it's mentioned, everyone calls him on this is ridiculous. That's not the
There.
legitimate title. That's how you do that gimmick, not have your face.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, but you can't do that. The announcers cannot do that to their baby face and the man who is legit the face of that show. You
When did you
know?
ever see a little baby face deface the title and not
Yes.
legitimately hold the title and steal the championship? All those the wrestling, 099 gimmicks of like, hey, he
Uh-huh.
took the belt, so now I'm pretending the champion. It's always the heel that does that. When
Of
did
course
a baby
it
face ever do that except Chick Magnet Phil?
of course it would and I think you and I might be having a very different conversation about this topic right now if it were anything or anyone besides CM Punk, because then we could talk about how novel this idea is, how really it just flips it flips it, and it's like this is brilliant. This doesn't happen with baby faces, but yet here it is. It could probably be a very different conversation we would be having if it wasn't Phil, because at this point we're full of Phil.
We're full of Phil.
Full of
And even
Phil.
our big finish ended up thematically wrapping back to Phil. We
Right?
can't stop talking about the guy. But we are stopping talking about the guy now because we're going to wrap up the Two Bros Wrestling Show for this week. We appreciate all of you, and that includes you too, Tony Khan, and apologize for burying your boy, but CM Punk's telling lies. We had to call him out on it. Next week, we're going to be much nicer to Tony Khan because, Doug, next week, our show, Tony Khan's been calling it the biggest event in pro wrestling history. We're going to preview it It's almost that time. We're only 2 weeks away from All In.
All
All In
in.
being on Sunday night. We will not go live on that Sunday and compete with All In. We'll
No,
take
we
that
will
week
not.
off.
No.
You see our schedule at the bottom. So join us on the 20th, and then we'll return the week after All In, and we'll be actually reviewing 2 pay-per-views in one. We'll give you our All In thoughts as well as Payback, which will have happened the night before. So much wrestling. I know Doug can't hardly wait to watch more.
I do love wrestling, and I'm sure there are also many other middle-aged marks out there that work full time and have a family that are just like, how do I fit it all in? Please tell me.
The disembodied image of my friend Doug is right. There's a lot of wrestling on. We're going to let you go watch some of it now and appreciate the time that you spent with us. Hope you come back and join us next week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Doug's probably waving behind
I am actually waving and nobody can see me. If I do this, whoa, 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 it at least makes that bounce a little bit, and it looks like I'm whoa, 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 whoa. There's my wave. I think I'm just going to do this from now on and just not be on camera. I like this.
Yeah, no fans. We will not let this. We will not let him do this again.
Just tell me when
I'm
telling lies, Kevin.
Liar.
All right, I'll make sure my battery's charged next time on my camera fully.
Good night, fans.
Good night, everybody. Go watch some wrestling.